with that girl that you've seen before, but she won't come down, and you're in denial. So you got the courage to show her what's in store. You tell her later, why'd you always frown and act all jaded? I'm not contagious, but I got the kind of love that knocks you down. I tell her later, why'd you always frown and act all jaded? I'm not contagious.
And we are back on Let Your Voice Be Heard on 90.3 FM WHCR, the voice of Harlem. And you just heard us finishing up a conversation on right to work and collective bargaining. Towards the tail end of that, we got into a really good discussion about, the right to strike and whether striking helps or hurts. And I want to thank both of the people that we had on as guests, Mike Snapper and Ross Eisenberry. Right now, moving on to the Defense of Marriage Act and Proposition 8. So just a quick little rundown. In 1996, Democratic President Bill Clinton signed in a bill titled the Defense of Marriage Act.
Yes, and let me finish that off while you get this caller. In 96, again, Clinton, he signed this bill into federal law, and what this law actually does is it defines marriage as exclusively between a man and a woman. That means that gay couples that legally get married in gay states will not be federally recognized, nor can they receive federal recognition or benefits, Stanley. So that is what DOMA is.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, guys. We got a phone call. Somebody was looking for his girlfriend, Tasha, apparently.
Really?
That was really awkward. Yes. So Selena pretty much defined what the bill was, but I want to take a fast forward. This is now 2012, heading towards the apocalypse on the 21st, and 2013 on January 1st. Yes, guys. Hide your kids, hide your wife, because we're coming for the apocalypse. And America has shifted significantly since then. As of today, we are a country that has over 9 million men and women who identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. In the same period, we have seen a huge shift in ideology, as now over 50% of American citizens think that we should support same-sex marriage across the United States.
How many people identify as gay, transgender? How many? What's that statistic?
I don't know transgender in particular, but
No, all of them. That's a statistic you just threw
over 9 million.
up. Okay, thank you, Philly.
The number shifts. It's a very elusive number. This is based on the census, and some people aren't necessarily out 100%, or they don't identify as that yet. So that's why the number is elusive. But from what we have, and I got this from an article on the Washington Post, that's what we know at the moment.
Got it.
Because of this, the question of same-sex marriage has heightened even more, and we've seen same-sex marriage be approved in states like New York, I think in Boston back in 2004, and a few other places. But for every state that says same-sex marriage is okay, you have 3 more states who say that marriage is defined as between a man and a woman, and a spouse must be a person of the opposite sex. So,
yep.
And with all of this happening, Supreme Court has finally decided to take a look at the Defense of Marriage Act, in particular, Sections 2 and 3. And we're going to go to Section 3 real quick so I can explain it, and then I want to introduce our guest. And it pretty much says, in determining the meaning of any act of Congress or of any ruling, regulation, or interpretation of the various administrative bureaus and agencies of the United States, the word marriage means only a legal union between one man and one woman as husband and wife. And the word spouse, like I said, refers only to a person of the opposite sex who is a husband or a wife. And this is where we begin our conversation, and we have our guest, Maya Rupert. She is a policy director of the National Center for Lesbian Rights, and obviously someone we can trust, to be very insightful, informative, and engaging in this conversation. We're very happy to have you here on the show. Maya, say hello.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for calling in, Maya.
And thanks for RTing us on Twitter. We appreciate the Twitter love.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I know I did. Thank you.
Maya, I always dream of having a cool radio voice. I don't. You do. Can you teach me?
Oh, you were kind. Thank you so much.
No problem. I'm happy to have you on here. We're going to be talking about a very important issue, but I'm glad that, we're kind of shifting the energy. So before we begin with anything, Maya, I want to give you the platform. Please begin and tell the listeners and us as well about you and your organization, as well as your stance on DOMA.
Oh, sure, absolutely. Well, like you said, I'm the policy director for the National Center for Lesbian Rights. NCLR we're based in San Francisco, but I'm out of our D.C. office where we do our policy and legislative stuff. But the organization is a legal organization that's dedicated to advancing the rights of LGBT people and their families through a number of different ways, through litigation, through policy and legislative work, through sort of public education, communications. We sort of have a number of different ways we work on these issues. So our litigation mostly comes out of San Francisco. A lot of people out on the West Coast know the organization well because we were the lead counsel on the in-ray marriage cases, which, for a little bit of background, that was the case before the California Supreme Court, where the California Supreme Court said that, marriage was a fundamental right and that it could not be denied to same-sex couples. My legal director was lead counsel. He argued that case. It was a phenomenal ruling, but the result of it was the efforts to get Prop 8. So that's sort of that was the reason for that push. The Supreme Court said this was a fundamental right, and so there was an effort to put those people's fundamental rights on the ballot. So that's sort of that's one of the bigger cases that we're known for nationally. Our position on DOMA, I think is pretty much what you'd imagine an LGBT organization's position on DOMA to be, and that's that it is an ironically named law. This does not actually defend marriage. This weakens marriage, and it weakens it weakens all couples. It weakens families, and it weakens us as Americans. This is not. This law is hurting people. It's hurting couples all over the country, and I'm excited that the Supreme Court chose to take the Windsor case. So to really bring attention to what this means, when we talk about marriage equality and we're advocating for it in states and we're seeing more and more victories, a lot of times what we're getting, are just people who kind of understand the fundamental human dignity argument behind the idea of marriage equality. But I think an equally important message to get out there is how this is financially hurting people in one of the hardest economic times of a generation, how difficult it really is for couples to navigate so many issues when there's a law like this in the books. It's financial. It's we can talk about a number of different ways that same-sex couples are really harmed by this law, and so I'm excited that this will really bring some light to those ways that it's really harmful.
Wow, that was definitely a mouthful and a lot of information. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Selena, you had a question? Go ahead.
I did. And if anyone else has a question, now's a good time to call up. We're speaking about same-sex marriage. We're speaking about DOMA. And we're talking about basically the Defense of Marriage Act. And this is up for decision in the Supreme Court. So the number is 212-650-6903. Hi, Maya. My question is, now you said, and I don't know if you were just speaking off the cuff, but it sounds like you said how that this law, DOMA, is hurting all couples. And I'm going to know, how is DOMA hurting heterosexual couples?
I think, I did mean that when I said that it hurts all couples, and I think that this is something that we particularly see in communities of color, and it's a point I've been trying to bring up in a lot of things that I've written and talked about when I talk about marriage equality. Any law that makes it so a family can be defined only by sort of, these kind of traditional, what have really become sort of outmoded ideas of what families look like. We all sort of know that most families do not have a mother, a father, two kids, and that sort of, the sort of nuclear family idea that we know from the 50s. That's not how a lot of families look now, and it's not how disproportionately a lot of families in communities of color look. We sort of know that it's not always, and it's not sort of always through, adoption or foster care systems. A lot of times in communities of color, what we see are, people are being raised by grandparents or an aunt or an uncle step in, or we have single parents raising kids. And these are all ways that families look, but that laws that try to say the only people who can be considered parents, for example, are a biological mother and a father or an adopted mother or father, that hurts any family that isn't sort of doesn't, have that kind of legally recognized protection or doesn't have the sort of biological link that we think of when we think of parents. So when we have laws that say, laws that only define parents and that give certain benefits that parents are able to have, allowing parents to, for example, put their kids on health insurance. If we have those only linked to, you have to be in a legally recognized marriage, and that, that has to be according to a federal definition of what a marriage means, that makes it really difficult for a lot of parents to take care of a lot of kids, and it's not limited just to same-sex couples. So that's kind of, that's sort of one example of that type of discrimination that winds up happening. A lot of communities are basically, it starts looking like, collateral damage in this war against same-sex couples. We're not looking at a bunch of different couples that maybe don't fit within these traditional definitions.
I'm so glad that you brought up the issue of economic justice, because in many ways, this argument is in fact about not just economic equality, but equal access to economic rights.
Right.
But I want to ask you maybe like a question of the constitutionality of basic personhood. Do you think that this dialogue from after this ruling will change or alter the way that we perceive personhood?
The way that we perceive personhood?
In our legal format, do you think it will actually move forward into actually defining economic personhood for the individual? Because right now we do have a very analogous definition of what can define to be a person. Somebody that pays taxes, somebody that is a basic citizen under the 14th Amendment. But do you think it will actually shift the actual conversation to make it so that we under the law, under the eyes of the government, we are inherently maybe even I would say entitled to certain rights like health, like basic federal mandates, et cetera, et cetera?
I'm hopeful that that's a conversation that we can have on a national level. I think that one of the most eye-opening and disturbing things that came out of this last election, when Romney made his comments about, 47% of people think that they're entitled to things, and the things that he listed were things like health and food and housing. And a lot of us sort of heard that, and yes, we were offended, but I think the bigger issue is sort of, are there really people that are claiming to represent people in this country who don't believe we're all entitled to those things? And is that only 47% of us? I think that the conversation that you're talking about is definitely one that is long overdue. I don't know that the rulings in the Prop 8 case or the DOMA case at the Supreme Court level would be the best vehicle to come into that. I actually think that we don't need to wait for rulings on those to start having that conversation. I think that, what we saw around healthcare and Obama's reelection, I think really sort of being a mandate to a large extent for a lot of people saying this is something that people are entitled to. This is not, it is not acceptable for a country with the history that the United States has and with the money and resources that we have, where people are dying of preventable illnesses because they did not have access to care up until it was past the point where they could really be treated. That it's not acceptable that we have the youth living on the street that we do. So I definitely think that that's a conversation that needs to be had.
That's a very true point, and that kind of conversation is something that many people would put on the side of a morale conversation. And I think the conversation of the bills of DOMA and Prop 8 and the conversation of same-sex marriage, a lot of times people say that the people who are against same-sex marriage, they're doing it because of moral issues, personal opinions. And with saying that, I kind of want to transition to a question that I've had for you. From a comment that one of the Supreme Court justices just recently made. So Chief Justice Roberts, I think it was, and I think you know what I'm talking about, so that's why you're laughing.
Oh, it's not Roberts?
It's Scalia. It's Scalia.
It wasn't Rob. If I'm thinking of the same quote, I think it was Scalia.
Yeah, sorry. In my head, I had it down as Scalia, and I'm like, wait, no, it was Roberts. So sorry, it was Scalia. Chief Justice Roberts, forgive me. Don't be mad at me if you're listening. He might be.
He may be the swing vote too.
Yeah, just like he was with Obamacare, and he will be with affirmative action. But the quote was, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, but the justice pretty much says, how can you say if you can't have moral feelings on same-sex marriage and gay and lesbian rights, how can you have moral feelings on murder?
What do you mean? Can you explain what that means, Stanley?
And what I got from that, what he was trying to say is, he's trying to say that he's trying to first of all put the perception of same-sex marriage and murder in the same light, as in it's something that we think is bad because we feel it's bad based on overall cultural and social morale.
Basically, he said that under the eyes of the law, there is always a moral factor.
Yeah.
The states should have the right to implement laws based on their moral values.
Yeah. So, and he was saying, how can you tell me that I can't decide on the same-sex marriage thing with my moral values, but it's okay to do so with murder? And I want to know.
So she's saying if she's morally against it
Mm-hmm.
because of whatever reasons, maybe that's religious or what so have you, then she should be able to use that reasoning in deciding. That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
And if you can't, then how can you say it's okay to do the same thing in murder? Because murder is as much of a moral thing as it is a legal thing.
I see.
And that creates an entirely different line in regards to, like, you know, how you perceive murder and even, you know, bestiality and incest and all those other things, which, you know, I'm not going to get into. But I want to know, what are your thoughts on that comment?
Well, I think I have a number of thoughts on that comment, not the least of which is that I think that Justice Scalia, like he often is, was being sort of intentionally inflammatory. He knew that he was placing, you know, people's sexual orientation, their families, their lives on the same level as murder in a way that was going to be perceived as offensive, and he was doing it intentionally. I think that the broader point that, you know, that this is a moral issue is one that is really, it's a personal one. If people have personal opinions about, you know, about people's sexual orientation, if they have personal opinions about the LGBT community, they have every right to have those, and I love that they have those. I take very seriously that people should have the rights to have those opinions, to express those opinions in whatever way possible. The problem is what we're talking about is a public sector issue. We're talking about marriage. We're talking about civil marriage. We're talking about government giving rights to couples and treating couples equally under the law. And when it's that, it has to be a public sector justification. Someone's moral opinions can dictate how they live their lives. It can dictate whether or not they decide to go to a church that would recognize a same-sex couple, but it cannot dictate whether or not we extend equal rights to couples.
Sorry about that. That was I'm really bumbling today. That was
Shout out to our engineer.
Yeah, right?
Tisk, tisk, tisk.
Yes, I wanted to play a song, but Maya, thank you so much for that answer. I actually want to get back to that, but we got to go on a quick break. So just hold on for us for about 2 minutes. We'll be right back. This is Hubert Think, Same Direction.
Whenever I step outside, somebody claims to see the light. It seems to me that all of us have lost our patience. 'Cause everyone thinks they're right, and nobody thinks that there just might be more than one road to our final destination. But I'm not ever gonna know.
WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
Someone else to blame. All the holes and answers that are clearly showing. For something to fill the space was all of the time I spent a waste. 'Cause so many choices point the same way I was going. But I'm not ever gonna know if I'm right or wrong. 'Cause where I'm going in the same direction.
Greetings. This is Honey from Harlem 411. Tune in to Harlem 411 Friday nights at 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. for information on health, education, housing, community events, and more. Harlem 411 serves information to you with the opportunity to call in with your questions. Harlem 411, produced to serve the community's needs. Let us serve you with information. Friday night, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Harlem 411.
And we are back on Let Your Voice Be Heard on 90.3 FM WHCR, the voice of Harlem. Right now we're talking about the Defense of Marriage Act and Proposition 8, same-sex marriage overall. And we have a wonderful guest, Miss Maya Rupert. who is why am I messing things up so badly today?
Well, she's with the National Center of Lesbian Rights. She's actually the federal policy director.
Yes, which means, in other words, she is awesome. So we were having this conversation, and now I want to have Keyshawn, just real quick. You had a comment while we were on break. I want you to talk about it. Go ahead.
Right. Hi, Maya. So my name is Keyshawn. And I was just telling, my fellow co-hosts here that I'm a conservative. But I've been listening to what you've been saying before we went to the commercial break, and if conservatives tell folks that we don't want to interfere in people's lives, but then they tell people who they should marry, I mean, what's the point there? They're undermining their own principles. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the whole gay marriage thing, I'm for anyone falling in love with who they want to fall in love with, because my view as a conservative is if I preach that I don't want to interfere in anybody's lives or dictate to anyone's lives, I shouldn't interfere with somebody's love life or anything like that. So that's just the comment I just wanted to make here.
And I just wanted to take it a step further, Maya, because I'm African American, and we know that the
Are you?
Yes. Is my mic on? Okay, and we know that the African American community has been one of the slowest communities progressing on gay rights. About 70% of that community still is against gay rights and gay marriage. And I come from a church, from a religious background that says being married, having same-sex couples is not right, that we do not support that in the church. And I get that, and that's how I've been brought up. And believe me, like, having that ingrained from a very young age does affect the way I view a lot of things in society. But I just want to piggyback off my conservative friend with a liberal conscience over here, that I also agree that government cannot tell people who to get married and who they can't. Even though I have a personal stance, I believe that it's perfectly okay for my pastor to say that I will never marry a gay couple in my church. But can the government, and should the government say, yeah, you guys shouldn't be able to get married too? And that's where, despite my religious beliefs and how I practice and being a Christian, and that type of Christian, I still don't feel comfortable with our government saying that.
And Maya, I wanna jump in now with what Keyshawn and Selena have said. How do you change their minds, or how do you rationalize with people who because of their ideals, whether it be religious, political, or what have you, with their ideals, and they feel a certain way? How do you rationalize with them to legalize same-sex marriage? Because, as you know, Selena, who obviously has a different perspective, but she was heavily influenced by her culture, her family, her religion. Keyshawn, I'm going to assume the same thing. Could be wrong, but there are so many other people who are influenced the same way, but don't have the same point of view as these two. So how do you reach those people? Because they're a huge number.
Oh, absolutely. And I will just say this because, Selena, I think you mentioned 70% of the African American community still being against marriage equality. We've actually seen some more recent exit polls that were taken like right after the election in November, that saw, I think it was like 51% of the Black community supporting marriage equality.
Yes. This was pre-election. Those were my numbers pre-election. Right. So yes, Maya, you might be right on that. Definitely.
That's pretty big deal.
We're seeing a huge shift, and I think sort of a number of things are to credit for that. And I think exactly what the two of you were sort of describing is that a lot of people have expressed that sort of ambivalence, that sort of, I hear this, but, given the way, I see things and the way I interpret my faith, my culture, my, sort of whatever, this doesn't quite seem right. So I'm hearing this message that given this demographic, I should feel this way, but I don't. I think that a lot of people have expressed that kind of ambivalence, and that's what we're seeing when we see these, we're really seeing a huge shift and so many more people supporting marriage equality, especially in communities of color. We're seeing the sort of the conservative split as well. A lot of people saying, listen, this is not why I'm a conservative. If I believe in small government, I need to believe in small government across the board, and that this is, I think that basically there's a momentum that is coming that it's sort of allowing people to sort of re-examine this issue. And I think a lot of things are to credit for that. I think that we've had a number of high-profile conservatives come out and say this should not be the thing that's driving our party or our consciousness. I think we've had, obviously, a number of huge, high-profile black leaders come out in favor of marriage equality. The NAACP coming out was huge. I think that we cannot underestimate what a big deal it was for President Obama, to talk about his evolution on the issue along with, Michelle Obama's evolution. Them coming out strongly in favor of marriage equality really did sort of, it allowed a lot of people in the black community to start saying, okay, look, yes, I've said this. Yes, this is what the churches have said in some instances, but this is, our families are changing just like everybody else's are, and people are coming out, and we're sort of, so I think that this idea that certain communities are more resistant to marriage equality is really becoming a much more outdated one. And I think, too, what we've seen, there's the information that came from the NOM, and now I can't remember what that actually stands for. It's the National Organization for Marriage or something like that. They're, an anti-marriage equality group who accidentally released some documents that outlined their strategy. And what their strategy was they were not subtle. They said that we are going to drive a wedge between the gay community and the black community as a way of, this is going to be our strategy to oppose marriage equality. And we're going to essentially use the black community to fight this battle for us. And I think that when people really started to see how much this was an effort on the part of people who are against equality to pit two marginalized groups against each other, that, I think, offends at a very core level any community that has suffered discrimination. And so once we started to see, I think, how much really this was an effort to keep us fighting a battle that other people wanted to fight, I mean, that's just, what I mean? I think that really had an impact, too. I think more and more we're seeing that this wedge issue should not be a wedge issue between the communities that are fighting it, because there are so many ways that the discrimination that people face based on racial inequality, based on sexual orientation, based on economic justice, that all of these issues are linked, that at the root there's the same impulse that makes people discriminate against all of these groups. And so we don't want to be fighting these battles for them. You know what I mean? So I think that the more information basically we're having on it, the less we're seeing those kinds of divides.
You said something very interesting, and before I continue, I just want to say, if you guys want to call in, number is 212-650-6903. Again, that number is 212-650-6903. And I had two questions for you. The first one is, you said that the same-sex marriage and the gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual movement, at its core, has kind of the same link as the civil rights movement did. Is that what you were trying to say?
No. Now they're not the same, and I don't think that it's useful to compare them. What I'm saying is that the impulse to discriminate is at its core the same. The people that are saying your family is your family isn't entitled to the same rights as my family. That impulse, it's the same impulse that we've seen be behind other types of discrimination. That's more what I'm saying. It's not that the two movements are the same, or that the type of discrimination people face is even the same. It's that there definitely is a link, and because there's such a huge overlap, there are people who are from racially marginalized groups who are also LGBT identified. We can't sort of deny that sort of nexus.
Okay. I see what you're saying now. All right. So just moving on then. So my next question is, it seems from what the gist of this conversation we just had is that, African Americans are moving more so towards in favor of same-sex marriage as well, at the same rate as a country. So more or less, we have more people who think that same-sex marriage is something that should just happen. It's fair. Leave these people be. Let them marry who they want to marry. Am I correct? Just really quickly, yes or no?
Maya?
Definitely think that is definitely the trajectory.
All right, so what's happening in Capitol Hill then? Because, it seems that we're all kind of in agreement, whether we like it or not. Capitol Hill is at a gridlock. We have, I think, over 10 states that have defined marriage as between a man and a woman in their constitution. What's going on over here? Tell me.
Well, I think that what we saw in this last election, up until November 6th, we had not gotten a single victory at the ballot box. Anytime this issue came up for a vote, it was a vote against marriage equality. And so I think that made it really hard for us to make exactly this case that, that the pendulum is swinging, that we're, that things are moving, things are shifting, because every time we looked at votes, we couldn't see that reflected. In this last election, we got 4 victories for marriage equality. And they were not in, it was sort of the next thing that people would always say is, well, yeah, if you get these victories, they're going to be, in New York, they're going to be in California, they're going to be in more liberal states, and what we saw was not that. It was Maine and Minnesota and, Maryland, which was huge because, again, the huge black population. Prince George County turned out, and it was. It was. It's always hard to say, what sort of demographic passed an amendment or something like that. But we had huge support in the black community, in very black districts for marriage equality, and so I think that we're going to start to see more of these sort of state level initiatives going our way. Now, the federal level, I work with Congress a lot, and we're still, it's always harder to get the federal government to do something than it's going to be on the state level. But I think that the more we're able to point to victories like this, the easier it is for us to make the case that this is something that's happening. This is a growing movement. This is there's a broader coalition of support, and that people will start to look old-fashioned, outdated. They will not be able to keep up with the new voters if this is still an issue that they're voting on. So I think that it's definitely going to take a little bit more time. We're going to have to use the election results that we just got and use those to continue to advocate.
Maya, definitely, I agree with you on many of the points that you just given, but I feel like there's a very real concern that a lot of either conservatives or religious people, or I don't know if you want to call them old school people, but they have a concern that they can't necessarily voice what they feel and like whether they have strong wherever their principles lie, but they feel like they can't voice or express how they feel in the public eye, whether that is against same-sex marriage or against same-sex couples. And I want to say, like, how do you deal with that? Because they feel like if they were to say that, then automatically they will be viewed as maybe being bigots or just anti-marriage, which no one wants to be or anti or homophobic, which no one wants to be stigmatized as. And I want to say, do you feel that they have a valid point to say that they shouldn't be able to say these things without being discriminated against themselves? Like, how do you take to that argument and that concern that a lot of Americans still feel?
So I've heard this argument before, and I have to say that it is one I'm not the most sympathetic to, because I think that is what it means to be in the public sphere. You express an opinion, and you have every right to do that. There's no, I hear this a lot of times in terms of the First Amendment. It's like, well, I have a First Amendment right to my opinion, but when I say it, everyone attacks me for it. The First Amendment only it protects your right to say something. You can say whatever you want. You literally can say anything you want. But in return, I get to say what I think of the opinion that you expressed. And if you are now expressing an opinion that a majority of people feel like is anti-equality or anti-marriage, and we all say that and we say it together, there is nothing that shields you from the natural consequences of the things that you say and do. And what that does symbolize, I think, is that there's a growing consensus that you can't get away with using language and using rhetoric to hold certain families to a lesser, to sort of putting them in a lesser category. I think that we've seen this with a number of sort of marginalized groups. It became socially unacceptable to say some things about a number of groups that it used to be okay to say. We don't say those people, this is unfair to call somebody misogynistic or racist or once it becomes socially unacceptable to say these things, what it's really saying is that enough of us think that is hateful, that it is damaging, that it is hurting people, and that is unfair. And so if you express those opinions, you have to be prepared for the consequences of them. Now, I think that there's a way to sort of rationally express some disagreement in a number of different and very controversial areas. But I think that the onus should fall to that public figure who wants to make that statement to figure out where that line is and to make sure that they're not saying anything offensive, because if they do, the rest of us who don't agree with them will hold them responsible for what they've said. And the First Amendment just simply does not protect from people getting mad at you for your opinions.
Absolutely right. So, Maya, this has been a great discussion, and we obviously need so much more time to talk about this, but unfortunately, we have to close this discussion at this point up. We'd love to have you on again, and I think the conversation of same-sex marriage and DOMA and Proposition 8 is one that's going to be going on for quite some time, especially after the Supreme Court makes a decision. But just to wrap things up, Maya, can you please tell our listeners how they can learn more about you and your organization?
Absolutely. If you go to www.nclrights.org, so that's nclrrights.org, you can learn about us. You can learn about all of our staff members, me included. Please feel free to send me an email. My email address is on the website. I'm always happy to talk about these issues or other issues that people find relevant. And thank you guys, seriously, again, so much for having me on. I hope we get to continue this conversation. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Likewise, Maya. Thank you so much for coming in today. So, guys, just to close things up on this discussion, same-sex marriage is most likely going to be an issue that we're always going to be at odds in on one level or another. But I do think that as Americans, we all agree with the basic idea that the government should not have the right to dictate how we live our lives. Because once that happens, it becomes, as so many conservatives and leftists and even some, Democrats and occupiers would say, it becomes a socialist state where the government tries to control everything. And I'm probably, illustrating what socialism is completely wrong. Every person here has certain inalienable rights. And one of those rights, in my strong opinion, should be marriage, whether they're gay, straight, lesbian, whatever. As long as you have two consenting parties, it should be okay. And until we have that as pretty much our platform for America, we will never be truly free.
Do you believe in polygamy too?
I don't believe in polygamy, but that's a personal opinion. But listen, guys, we're going to be right back. We're going to quick break. This is Nicki Minaj Starships. We'll be back with the news roundup. We didn't forget this, guys.
WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
And we are back on Let Your Voice Be Heard on 90.3 FM WHCR, the voice of Harlem. Listen, guys, we want to hear your voice, and this is the news roundup. If you know how it goes, guys, you know the drill. If you don't know the drill, if you have any funny, interesting, empowering, angry, or interesting news, please share it with us.
Or interesting.
I said that last, Lena.
I think you said it twice.
Oh, okay. Our number is 212-650-6903. Again, that is 212-650-6903. And I want to kick this off with something that I'm super excited about and super happy about because it's also on our super website, LYVBH.com. Superman, the Man of Steel, they released a second trailer this past week. And guess where we have it? On our website, LYVBH.com. It is awesome.
The trailer?
Yes, the second trailer.
Oh my God, I love Stanley. Shameless plug of our show. Nice, Stanley.
This is what
you
I
get
do.
Props.
Pound it.
Woo, so watch that.
Stan, do you believe in the Superman curse, by the way?
The Superman curse? What's the Superman curse?
Well,
all the Supermans die.
Yeah, all the Supermans pretty much have like mishaps in their lives.
Well, Brian Root's career is pretty much dead, so you know.
There you go.
Well,
yeah, what
Brandon
happened
Routh
to
is
that
still
guy
out
that
there.
acted as Superman in the other movie, Superman Returns?
Brian Root.
Brian Roth.
Brian Root.
He's still somewhere. I don't know what happened to him.
He was in that movie that was awesome, which I forgot the title.
Scott Pilgrim.
Scott Pilgrim
Right.
versus everybody
Yeah.
or something like that. He was pretty awesome in there. He was a vegan with superpowers. Dean Cain, who was in the Superman series, is doing things in life somewhere. He's in Lifetime movies. But the Superman Return movie was such a bomb in the box office. Not with like numbers too, but just it wasn't that good of a movie. It was way too much of a romantic comedy. They should have had who's the guy from romantic comedies? Matthew McConaughey. He could have played Superman for how fluffy it was, and it got bad reviews. So that's why I'm so happy. Christopher Nolan he's the producer of this movie. It's going to be awesome.
Are you going to see it in the theater, Stanley?
Of course. Why wouldn't I?
Well, I look. Look, I'm not trying to look. That I was not trying to insinuate anything. I just want to know if he was gonna see it on bootleg or the theater. See,
Selena,
I don't.
are you trying to? Hold on. First of
I
all,
have some real news.
I would like to
though.
say
Hold
before
on.
you continue, I would like to say this: it is not called bootleg. It is called outsourcing. Economic outsourcing, because you cannot afford to go to the movies. You economically outsource it on certain websites or Chinamen who come and sell it to you at the barbershop. Thank you very much.
You're welcome on that, Stanley. Anyway.
Anyways, back to the news.
Yes, Carlos, what's going on with our good friend John Boehner?
Well, our good friend John Boehner yesterday may have just conceded for tax cuts. He has agreed to raise taxes on millionaires.
What, really? Like on the record?
On the record,
Yes.
he made the offer to the president, to the White House, to raise taxes, to raise revenue to millionaires.
He's going to lose his party.
Unfortunately, and there's a little caveat, there will be very steep entitlement cuts, and the White
We
House
can't do it.
rejected the deal.
Oh, thank God, Obama. Thank you for having a backbone.
He
Stand
actually
up, Obama.
he is standing up right now. I am a lot happier the way he's legislating now as a president than he was doing in the last 4 years. He's actually solidifying himself as a progressive, unlike a centrist back in wherever when the debt ceiling crisis was going on.
Because there's no more elections.
Well, and exactly. But I think the problem that we're going to have now is really finding some middle ground to how to bridge that tax.
Yeah.
He wants to kind of extend it to people who make over $250,000.
Yeah.
That's not, honestly, it's not, people who make $250,000, people like my parents, they're not we're not wealthy.
You're a 1%er?
Well, yes, yes.
You
I'm a 1%.
undercover liberal, you.
Tisk.
You
Anyways,
undercover conservative, I mean.
Millionaires are an entirely different story. That they can actually afford having a tax. That's why they have something called the Buffett rule, which actually extends the rate for capital gains taxes, et cetera, et cetera. But we do have some leeway to cut spending. But Obama wants to add in some stimulus spending as well to kind of like button in and kind of re-stimulate the economy.
All right, cool.
I
Selena.
actually heard a very interesting argument. I was speaking to an independent at Sirius Radio. Shout out to Tatum. And he was telling me that the reason why he doesn't agree with how he put it, taking money from the millionaires to give to the government, is because what is the government spending it on? They're spending it on China. They're spending it on war. So why should they cut these hardworking millionaires who work so hard for inherited money, and they work so hard in nepotism to get these jobs? Why should you take that money? I'm being sarcastic. Some of them do work hard.
We know.
But
yeah.
no. Is my mic on?
Yeah, your mic is on.
Okay,
Selena.
good. So I'm just saying, like, so why should we take that if the government's just going to spend it frivolously on... Frivolously. I can't say the word regardless,
Frivolously.
okay? So I'm
Sound
not
it
going
out.
to debate with you.
All right.
Anyway, I can spell it, though. That's all that matters.
You can smell it, you
I
said?
can spell it. Stanley, look, you are not going to distract from my point.
You're not
okay?
dyslexic. Go ahead, Selena. And then Keyshawn has something to say, too.
Yeah, so that is the argument that I'm hearing. Feedback, please, is welcome.
Yes, Selena, yes, but what's wrong with the whole thing that you just said about how taking away millionaires' money? How is that going to solve our financial crisis if you're just taxing millionaires? I don't think
Because to pay off the debt,
Yeah.
you need to create
Yeah, but-
revenue.
Okay.
The reason why we have debt is because we have not actually had any form of spending done to revenue. We don't have revenue. We've been paying off our basic services on a credit
But
card.
even if you take all the money that all the affluent people in America has, I mean, how's
No
that
one's- no
still
one's saying
gonna-
they're gonna
Hold on,
take away-
Keyshawn, because we have to wrap up.
Okay,
Keyshawn,
right.
give your final thoughts on this.
Well, my whole thing is that, look, I believe that you need a balanced approach. I mean, you need revenue and you need tax cuts. But my personal opinion is I don't think that raising taxes on the wealthy will do anything to solve this crisis.
I think it will. I think it will actually
And
be.
I disagree. I don't
think it'd
think
be a
so.
good chunk to actually pay off our skyrocketing deficit.
And I
mean,
love
how many,
this.
How many people though are millionaires and billionaires in the country though? That's the problem.
Wait, 1%.
You know,
1%, actually. I'm kidding.
1%.
But they own 40% of everything.
Let me jump in right now. I want to be the one at the closure of this, actually, because, yes, I had the boards. It's not going to solve it if you just tax millionaires or the top 1%.
Right.
But what it is a start, because when Bush cut the taxes in 01 and in 03, you cut revenue and didn't replace it. So we're going to bring back some of that revenue, make some cuts on entitlements, and then figure out the rest along the way by ending wars and things like that. But this is a conversation we're going to have again. We need to have again.
Keyshawn versus Carlos.
Round
I
two.
think
Part
we need to
two.
continue this
Wait, but
But
we
listen,
really
guys,
do.
Right now, guys, we got to get out of here. Brother Leroy is
Aw.
up next. Listen, we had an amazing show with
We really
amazing guests, but
did.
you guys need to remember and keep in your prayers the
Yes.
families in Newtown, Connecticut. 20 children lost their lives.
They were in my prayers so much, I started crying.
Exactly. 20 children. I'm not
But
displacing the adults.
no, let's pray for them, but let's do something about this.
Yes, let's
take some action.
27 people died. 26 or 27 people died. We have to take action, guys. Let's not forget them. Their lives are important. Let's not have this happen again. Whether you're for stricter gun laws or not, we have to find out why these things keep happening and then address them. Obama, I don't want a parent. I want a politician and a president. Get to work.
Stop talking about my president, okay?
Thank you,
Obama,
Stan.
let's
Thank you.
push
Welcome.
our
Thank you,
president.
Stan.
What needs to happen is the public needs to push the president. That's the only way that he can make these
I
moves
just
if he
shoved
has
him.
public support. Yes, but we all need to collectively push him.
But listen, guys, this song that I'm playing now is in dedication to all the families out there in
Nice.
Newtown, Connecticut, and everyone who has been a victim of gun violence or mass shootings, including the 10 people who were shot in Chicago an hour, like 24 hours after what happened in Newtown,
that
Connecticut.
didn't get news headlines and that type of coverage. Gun
So
violence
this song
is
is
a prevalent
dedicated to
you.
Michael Jackson, Jackson 5.
And we'll
I'll
see
be
you
there.
next week, though.
You will see us next week. We'll have Lisa Bloom on air as well, guys. We'll be back. Let your voice be heard.
WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.